All right, let's dive into this. The 2004 Phuket tsunami.
Hmm.
We're looking at this blog post, Phuket Tsunami 2004, Lessons in Resilience and Preparedness. And what's interesting is it comes from Ocean Worldwide. They're a luxury real estate agency,
Mhm.
and they've been in Phuket since, well, 2004.
Yeah, that's a really important point to consider. It's not some sort of like detached historical account. It's a view that's been shaped by like actually being there. Seeing how Phuket has recovered and grown
Yeah.
over time. And Sandra O'Neill, the director, she's been there like over 2 decades,
Wow.
helping families and investors, find property. So she really understands the history of the island and how this event impacted everyone.
Yeah, that sounds like this is going to give us like the facts and the feel, like
Yeah.
what it was actually like. So let's start with that, like the event itself. This blog post describes the tsunami hitting Phuket, waves 300 meters inland, the devastation in Pettina Beach. Yeah, just terrifying.
Yeah, it really it makes you realize the power of nature. We're not just talking about a big wave here. This was caused by the Indian Ocean earthquake, which was a magnitude 9.1 to 9.3. I mean, to give you an idea of how strong that is, it's like hundreds of times more powerful than an atomic bomb.
I can't even imagine that. And I was reading in the post that some parts of Phuket had less damage because of natural barriers like sand dunes. I guess they kind of acted like a shield.
Exactly. They acted as a buffer, absorbing some of the impact.
Yeah.
It really shows how the natural landscape can play a huge role in minimizing the damage. In fact, the blog post even gives an example of a beach where the only significant damage was to a hotel that had, get this, removed its protective sand dunes.
Oh, wow.
That's quite a powerful lesson, especially for, considering Ocean Worldwide's focus on real estate and how development decisions can have long-term effects.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if they're doing anything now to like restore those natural barriers, after seeing how important they are.
Oh, absolutely. The tsunami really highlighted the crucial need for sustainable coastal development. And the post talks about preserving things like mangroves and coral reefs, making sure building codes are stricter, and understanding that short-term gains can actually lead to really bad long-term consequences. And it's probably something that, someone like Sandra O'Neill, with her experience in real estate, really advocates for.
That makes a lot of sense, especially because Ocean Worldwide specializes in those luxury properties, right?
Yeah.
So protecting the environment, it's not just like the right thing to do, it also directly affects the value of the homes, right?
Absolutely. And that's where Sandra O'Neill's knowledge and experience becomes so valuable. She's not just selling houses, she's helping shape the entire conversation about sustainable development on the island.
Yeah. This is really interesting. So we're seeing the environmental impact, but obviously the human cost, the toll was. The post says thousands of lives were lost, and the survivors, I mean, the trauma they went through, it's hard to fathom.
Yeah, it's truly heartbreaking. But even amidst all that devastation, there were amazing stories of courage and quick thinking. The blog post highlights a young British girl, Tilly Smith. She actually saved lives because she recognized the warning signs of a tsunami, all from what she learned in her geography class.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. What did she see, and how did she convince everyone to get to safety?
Well, the post says she noticed the water receding really fast from the shore, and she remembered learning that this is a classic sign of a tsunami about to hit.
Right.
So she told her family, and they, in turn, alerted other people on the beach.
Oh, wow.
It really shows how powerful education and awareness can be, especially when it comes to natural disasters.
Absolutely. I'm also curious about the local response. Did the blog post talk about what people in the communities did to help each other?
Yeah, it did. It mentioned that fishermen, shopkeepers, and just everyday people were putting their own lives on the line to save others. And there's a really interesting part about the Moken people, an indigenous community who've lived in that area for centuries. Their deep knowledge of the sea actually helped them predict the tsunami, and they moved to higher ground before the waves hit.
Wow, that's incredible. They basically used their understanding of nature to save themselves.
Yeah.
It really speaks to, how valuable that traditional ecological knowledge is.
Exactly. It's another example of how understanding the environment, whether it's through formal education or generations of experience, can be the difference between life and death in a crisis.
Speaking of understanding, the blog post mentioned something about how the media covered the tsunami. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. The Post points out that a lot of the media focused heavily on the tourist areas and didn't really show what was happening in the local fishing villages. They were hit just as hard, if not harder.
Yeah, that's an important point. Did the blog post say anything about how that kind of biased reporting, how it might have affected the relief efforts?
It did suggest that the focus on tourist areas might have influenced where aid was sent, potentially taking it away from communities that really needed it.
That's uh that's a serious issue. Yeah, it makes you think about how media can shape our perceptions and
Yeah.
even how resources are allocated during a crisis.
Yeah, it's a reminder to always be critical of the information we receive, especially in disaster situations, and to look for diverse perspectives. We need to make sure that aid and support reaches everyone who is affected, not just the ones who are getting all the attention.
Absolutely. So let's move on to what happened after. The Post mentions the government's response, things like setting up emergency shelters, providing medical care, and the huge job of rebuilding everything.
Yeah, the scale of that relief effort was massive. And the Post goes into detail about some of the challenges they faced, reaching those remote villages, making sure aid was actually getting to the people who needed it the most, and even dealing with corruption, which unfortunately can pop up in those situations.
I can imagine. It must have been a logistical nightmare trying to coordinate all that after such widespread devastation.
It really was. But the Post also acknowledges how resilient the Phuket community was. People supported each other, they found ways to rebuild their lives, and they showed incredible strength in the face of, such heartbreaking loss.
That's really inspiring to hear. I'd love to learn more about how they rebuilt. Did the Post go into detail about those long-term recovery efforts?
Yeah, it did. It talked about rebuilding not just like buildings and stuff, but the whole tourism industry. It was obviously really affected by the tsunami. And, given that Ocean Worldwide focuses on luxury real estate in Phuket and Koh Samui, I'm sure this topic is, close to Sandra O'Neill's heart.
Right, right. Tourism is a huge part of Phuket's economy. What did they do to bring it back?
Well, the first thing, obviously, was repairing all the damage and making sure travelers felt safe again. But the Post emphasizes that it wasn't just about going back to the way things were before, it was about rebuilding in a way that would be more sustainable and able to withstand future shocks.
So, did the tsunami actually change how Phuket approaches development?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The Post talks about the lessons they learned, like how crucial those natural barriers are, the mangroves, coral reefs, and the need for stricter rules about where you can build. It seems like the whole island had a bit of a wake-up call.
Yeah. And I can see how someone like Sandra O'Neill, with her deep understanding of real estate, would be a leading voice in that discussion. She's not just selling properties, she's helping to shape the future of Phuket.
Exactly. And the blog post highlights a shift in thinking that goes way beyond just Phuket. The 2004 tsunami had a global impact. It led to advances in tsunami research, countries working together better on disaster management, and even changes in global policies.
So this one event in Phuket triggered a worldwide response.
In many ways, yes. Scientists learned a lot more about how tsunamis work, which helped them create better models to predict them and map out the areas at risk. And then they created the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System. So now there's a proper early warning system in place for the whole region.
Wow.
And there's been a big push for sharing knowledge and coordinating relief efforts on a global scale.
It's amazing to think that all these positive things came out of such a tragedy. Did the blog post mention any other lasting impacts?
Yeah, it talked about building codes being changed so that structures are more resistant to tsunamis.
Makes sense.
And more places around the world have implemented early warning systems, and there's more focus on things like evacuation drills and educating people about what to do in a disaster. It seems like the world sort of learned a really hard lesson and is trying to be better prepared for next time.
It's a really powerful example of how even the worst events can lead to progress and positive change.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about the human cost of this tsunami. The blog post mentioned memorials in Phuket that honor the victims. What are they like?
They're all different shapes and sizes and are in different places, but they all serve as reminders of the lives that were lost and the lessons we learned. Like there's the Banam Kem Tsunami Memorial Park. It's a big memorial that tells the story of the tsunami and commemorates the victims.
Right.
But then there are also smaller, more personal memorials around the island, often created by families or communities who lost loved ones.
It sounds like these memorials give people a place to reflect and remember, which is so important. And this blog post itself, with its focus on resilience and being prepared, it almost feels like a kind of memorial too.
That's an interesting way to look at it. It's like a way of making sure that the lessons from the tsunami aren't forgotten and that future generations can benefit from the experiences of those who went through it.
It makes me think that because this blog post comes from Ocean Worldwide, it adds another layer to this whole idea of remembrance. They're not just looking back at the past, they're using what they learned to try to build a better future for Phuket.
That's a really good point. It ties in with what we were saying earlier about sustainable development. Ocean Worldwide is taking those lessons from the tsunami
Yeah.
and applying them to their work, which is helping create a stronger and more sustainable future for Phuket, not just for the environment, but also for the people who live there.
Yeah, it sounds like they're thinking about the long term. They understand that the health of the island is tied to their own success.
Absolutely. And I think that's something we can all learn from, whether we live on the coast or not. We all play a role in building a more sustainable and resilient future. The decisions we make today will have an impact on generations to come.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected, and our actions, even in what seem like isolated situations, can have ripple effects across the world.
And the blog post really emphasizes that global interconnectedness, even though it focuses on Phuket. The tsunami led to a worldwide response. We've got advances in science, changes in policy, and better disaster preparedness, all of which are helping people all over the world.
It's a pretty powerful message of hope. Even in the middle of tragedy, we can see potential for growth, people coming together, and this shared commitment to building a better future.
Definitely. And it makes me think about what Sandra O'Neill and Ocean Worldwide are doing in Phuket. They're not just rebuilding, they're rebuilding smarter,
Yeah.
with a deeper understanding of how the environment, the economy, and the community are all connected. And they're creating a model for sustainable development that other places can learn from.
This deep dive has been really insightful. We've covered a lot, from the science of the tsunami to those amazing stories of courage and resilience to the bigger picture of sustainable development.
And we started with a blog post from a luxury real estate agency in Phuket.
Yeah.
It's incredible what you can learn when you take the time to really dig into something, even a topic as complex and challenging as this.
Yeah, it just shows how important it is to get different points of view. Sometimes the most insightful stuff comes from the least expected places. You wouldn't think a real estate company would have such profound things to say about a natural disaster.
Exactly, and that's what I love about these deep dives. They make you question your assumptions and see connections between things that seem totally unrelated. Like in this case, we see how a luxury real estate agency, Ocean Worldwide, is completely tied to the environment and social fabric of Phuket.
Yeah, and how that connection has shaped their whole approach to business since the tsunami. It's not just about making money, it's about making Phuket a better place for everyone, now and in the future.
Exactly. And it makes you think about how businesses can be a real force for good for a more sustainable and resilient world. It's not just about some kind of corporate social responsibility program. It's about realizing that if the community and the environment are healthy, then their business will be too.
Yeah, it's a powerful message for sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that even after something as horrific as this tsunami, there's always hope. The 2004 Phuket tsunami was devastating, no doubt about it, but it also set in motion a wave of positive changes. Advances in science, better global cooperation, and communities all over the world taking disaster preparedness a lot more seriously. And for Phuket, it was a chance to really rethink development and put sustainability and resilience first.
And it sounds like Ocean Worldwide, with Sandra O'Neill leading the way, are a big part of that change. They're using their position and their expertise to advocate for responsible development and create a future for Phuket that's both prosperous and sustainable.
Exactly. And their story reminds us that we all have a role to play in creating a better future, no matter what we do or what our background is.
That's a really great point to end on. It's not just about getting through disasters, it's about learning from them and using that knowledge to create a world that can handle whatever challenges come next.
Well said. And who knows, maybe our listener will be inspired to make a difference in their own community, push for change, or even just become more aware of how interconnected our world really is.
That would be amazing. Well, thanks for walking us through this. It's been a really fascinating and eye-opening discussion.
My pleasure. And to our listener, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. There's a whole world out there just waiting to be explored.